We thank Zuko very much for his speech and the opposition for their case. I'd now like to call back Lauren to close the debate.
As side propositions today, if we were to agree with opposition's analysis capacity, we find it extremely ironic that they seem to believe that someone with absolutely no parliamentary experience, such as Julius Malema, is absolutely removed from his people, is more capable as a politician than people who are actually part of that society and actually citizens within that society. So it's because of this, in terms of representation, that we think that the same burden was set by both sides of the House today. However, the flaw that existed inside opposition's case was the fact that they failed to engage with reality. They seem to believe that simply because you vote for a party, you're going to agree with every single decision that they make because of the fact that you voted for the specific ideals that they put forward. We simply don't think that this is true. Moreover, the distinction that needed to be made on their side of the House was whether or not political knowledge and political ambition seems to dictate the ability to actually engage with what's happening in society and what's happening within the ground basis of real people and real issues that they face. So because of this, I've divided this entire debate today into two main issues. Firstly, this idea of capacity, and secondly, this idea of efficacy. So, going straight into this idea of capacity, basically what I want to ask is who has the greatest capacity to provide representation to the general society? So, I'm going to deal with this the same way it was brought up from the outset of today's debate, which had very little contention to it. Firstly, we gave you the idea that first they have to understand what issues need to be dealt with, and secondly, they actually need to care about what impact these issues and decisions are going to have. On this first level of understanding what issues are going to be needed to be dealt with, opposition's response to our matter about actually identifying what decisions need to be made by Parliament were that politicians are trained in analysing things. They didn't actually show us to this point and that they understand politics. What they didn't show us and didn't understand was how political knowledge actually equates to the ability to engage with real people when you're completely biased towards a party's ideals rather than what people actually want. We gave you examples such as the secrecy bill, such as Black Tuesday, etc. So what we think here is that they're not capable of recognizing problems in society to the extent that they are capable of actually going with problems that they want to see. The second level here is basically, proposition shows you today that allowing for representation is to be based on gender and race. People have a self-invested interest in actually caring about what happens at the end of it. We think that opposition told us today that politicians are driven by ambition, are driven by a career-based thing. We don't think it's okay when you're dealing with what is going to happen to people on the ground level if that's your main goal. We want people who actually care about what happens, and we think that race and gender is a fair thing because of the fact it is going to affect them. And we think you have more in common with an Indian A1 rather than you do with an old rich white man who doesn't actually care about progressive women's rights. So what we actually need to say here is that opposition needs to not only prove the ability of a member of politics already, but they also need to disprove the ability of a member of society to fulfill this role. We don't think they did this, and that's why this point completely falls aside for opposition. But moving on to the second idea of efficacy, and basically here we need to ask which mechanism actually allows for true representation within today's debate, because we think this is the crux that the debate came down to from the beginning. So firstly, I'm going to quickly clear up this entire government power thing. We see that we had absolutely no response to Priya's matter about how checks and balances within the Parliament already exist in order to ensure that we don't have an ineffective government. We didn't have a response there. We think it was very essential that we needed one. Moreover, they asked us to respond to Sadia's matter about how we're actually forcing people into these kind of positions, but I don't see how we're supposed to respond to that, and they said bring it up now, so we don't think that was fair on their side of the House. The next thing here is we consistently show you that Parliament's role is based within a societal context, and government isn't involved here specifically, unless they're going to be enforcing and implementing rules, and that is where the distinction is made. But this last idea is we're going to look at this idea of the actual efficacy in deciding now that we've done that. Within it currently, we showed you tangibles such as voter apathy, such as voting for the next biggest party because there aren't the ideals that you actually promote, and such as things that how minority views just aren't represented because no one actually cares about them because they don't promote views. Opposition's response was basically, no one actually gets a say in the end, and basically if you want representation, you've got to just join the right party. We don't think that this was legitimate or substantiated enough in terms of today's debate. So basically, in terms of true representation, I think the only way you can actually bring forward this kind of motion is if you stand beside the opposition's policy. Thank you.